9 husbands, 1 legendary slap, and a habit for walking away with the house every time. Was Zsa Zsa Gabor Hollywood royalty or the ultimate chaos queen? Join us and find out. From Budapest to boarding school. Zsa Zsa Gabor was born as Zsa Gabor on February 6, 1917, in Budapest, Hungary. She was the middle daughter in a well-to-do family with strong European roots. Her father, Vilmos Gabor, was a decorated Hungarian army officer. Her mother, Zsa Gabor, came from a wealthy background and eventually became known for her successful jewelry business. Zsa was ambitious and socially well-connected, with a sharp eye for taste and refinement. She had a major influence on her daughter's upbringing, especially regarding elegance, charm, and presentation. The Gabor household was not ordinary by any means. Sari and her sisters, Magda the eldest and Eva the youngest, grew up surrounded by privilege. Their days were shaped by luxury and strict expectations. The family had a full-time household staff, and the girls were dressed impeccably from a young age. Their home life included vacations abroad, formal events, and visits from wealthy and influential guests. Zsa pushed her daughters to become polished, accomplished women who could move comfortably through high society. That push came with high standards and constant pressure to maintain appearances. From a young age, Sari showed signs of flair. She liked attention and enjoyed performing. She loved to mimic adults, wear her mother's makeup, and pose for pictures even when no one was watching. Her nickname, Zsa Zsa, came about naturally. It was a pet name given by her family, something playful and sweet. She liked it enough to make it stick, and she started introducing herself that way long before fame entered the picture. Education in the Gabor family was not taken lightly. Zsa insisted that her daughters receive more than just etiquette training or finishing school. She wanted them to be fluent in languages, cultured in the arts, and capable of making an impression in any setting. At the age of 13, Zsa Zsa was sent to Switzerland to attend a boarding school. This wasn't unusual for girls of their social rank, but for Zsa Zsa, it marked a major shift. She left behind the comforts of home and was suddenly surrounded by new languages, strict teachers, and an international student body. The school focused on academics and discipline, but Zsa Zsa found ways to stand out. Even there, her sense of style and dramatic charm made her memorable. Boarding school life wasn't always easy. She was far from home and under constant scrutiny. Those years in Switzerland gave her structure and polish, which she would later use to her advantage. She became fluent in several languages, including German and French. She also developed a sense of independence. Though her life had always been controlled by strong women, especially her mother, this was the first time she had to learn how to carry herself without anyone stepping in. While finishing school in Switzerland, Zsa Zsa took part in recitals, performances, and social events meant to train young women for upper-class life. These experiences gave her a formal introduction to stage performance and opened the door to something bigger than polite society. She wasn't just the daughter of a wealthy Hungarian woman anymore. She was beginning to imagine herself as someone who could make a living, maybe even a name, by being exactly who she already was. Beauty queen and scandal. And she started this journey off by winning Miss Hungary in 1936 when she was only 19. Her win wasn't a surprise to anyone who knew her, but not long after receiving the crown, the truth about her age surfaced. Zsa Zsa had lied on her application, claiming to be younger than she actually was. Pageant rules were strict, and once the lie came to light, her title was taken away. The scandal didn't damage her confidence, though. If anything, it added fuel to the public image she would later craft, one that didn't follow rules, one that made its own. After the pageant, she was already thinking bigger. She moved to Vienna and enrolled at the Vienna Acting Academy. Her time there was short but meaningful. She wasn't focused on building a long academic record. What mattered more to her was visibility and connection. She knew how to place herself in the right circles, and that paid off quickly. While she was still finishing her acting training, she caught the attention of a well-known figure in the opera world, Richard Tauber, a famous Austrian tenor. Tauber wasn't just impressed by how she looked, he saw performance potential. He invited her to appear in his Operetta der Singende Traum, or The Singing Dream. She was cast as the soubrette, a playful and often flirtatious character common in musical theater. It was her official stage debut and gave her her first real taste of what it meant to perform in front of a paying audience. What stood out most during this time was how easily she combined ambition with charm. She wasn't just trying to build a career, she was building an image. The press took notice, and so did people in entertainment circles. She had the kind of magnetic presence that didn't need much help to get people talking. But even as she was stepping into the spotlight, controversy was already part of her story. The age scandal from Miss Hungary followed her around. It didn't stop her from moving forward, but it stayed attached to her name. That pattern, getting attention, getting caught, and then carrying on anyway, would repeat more than once in her life. She wasn't bothered by backlash or whispers behind the scenes. In fact, it became clear early on that she welcomed attention, even if it came with complications. Her mother, Zsa Zsa Gabor, encouraged her daughters to be seen, to stand out, to become more than just socialites. Jolie's influence was strong, and Zsa Zsa took that advice and ran with it. By the time she left Europe, she had already figured out how to use scandal as part of her appeal. The stripped crown and her fast-moving early career weren't failures in her mind. They were just steps in the path she had already decided to walk. From that point on, it wasn't just about acting or performing. First marriage and a new continent. When Zsa Zsa Gabor was just 20 years old, she made her first major adult decision, and she made it on her terms. She met Burhan Asaf Belge, a Turkish diplomat who was 15 years older than her, and she proposed marriage to him herself. That move alone says a lot about her personality early on. Bold, self-assured, and unafraid to break the norm. The engagement was a lavish affair. Her parents, who were part of Hungary's well-connected elite, gave her a 10-carat diamond ring along with other expensive gifts to mark the occasion. The marriage took place in 1937. Belge was a respected figure in diplomatic circles and worked with the Turkish government. Zsa Zsa entered the marriage already carrying the confidence of someone used to being noticed. But moving into diplomatic society came with expectations. She was expected to play the role of the charming wife at formal dinners and political events, often hosting foreign officials and dignitaries. At first, she adapted to this new world. She dressed the part, smiled for the cameras, and took her place beside her husband in public. Behind the scenes, though, it wasn't a perfect match. Zsa Zsa later said that she married Belge partly because she wanted to escape her parents' control. She was young and looking for independence, and the marriage gave her a sense of freedom, even if it came with responsibilities she didn't fully enjoy. Life in Turkey was a change from the European cities she had known. The culture was different. The pace was slower, and she didn't have the same kind of social scene she had grown up with in Budapest or seen in Vienna. She often felt disconnected, even isolated. And over time, her desire for glamour and excitement began to outweigh her interest in the calm, orderly life of a diplomat's wife. As the world changed in the late 1930s, so did Zsa Zsa's personal life. The marriage began to fall apart by the time World War II was underway. She and Burhan Belge had grown distant, and she wasn't interested in saving something that no longer made sense to her. Meanwhile, back in Hungary, her own parents were also going through a divorce. In 1941, Zsa Zsa and her mother Jolie made a decision that would change everything. They left Europe altogether and headed for the United States. Her younger sister Eva had already settled there with her husband, and it made sense to reunite the family in a safer place, away from the war and the tensions building across Europe. Arriving in America, Zsa Zsa wasted no time starting fresh. She filed for divorce from Belge shortly after she landed. She had no plans to stay in the shadows. While many people come to the U.S. looking for opportunity, Zsa Zsa came ready to claim it. She was arriving with a unique advantage. She looked and sounded different from the typical American starlets of the time, which made her stand out in a city that thrived on new faces and distinct personalities. So, she was quick to find her place among social circles, and her European charm made her a hit in high society. She didn't waste time looking back at her first marriage. For her, that chapter had served its purpose. It gave her the push she needed to break away from her old life, and it opened the door to a new one on a different continent. What she didn't know yet was that the real show was about to begin. Becoming a Hilton. Not long after settling in, she crossed paths with one of the wealthiest and most powerful men in the country, hotel tycoon Conrad Hilton. They met at the prestigious Ambassador Hotel in Los Angeles, where the elite gathered to drink, dance, and do business. Zsa Zsa was already known for her charm and confidence, and Hilton noticed. According to her own telling, Hilton approached her boldly, offering $20,000 if she would leave with him that night for Florida. Zsa Zsa refused the offer, but she didn't walk away. Instead, a relationship began. 4 months later, they were married. On April 10, 1942, Zsa Zsa Gabor became the wife of Conrad Hilton. She was 25, he was 55, and one of the richest men in America. Their marriage was a public event. The union brought her immediate status in American society. She was no longer just a Hungarian beauty trying to break into film. She was Zsa Zsa Hilton, married into one of the most recognizable names in the world. While she came from money herself, the Hilton name was different. It represented American wealth, real estate power, and social capital. The marriage produced one daughter, Francesca Hilton, born in March 1947. Zsa Zsa often spoke with affection about Francesca, but their relationship later grew complicated, especially in the final years of Zsa Zsa's life. For now, though, she was a young mother in the middle of high society, hosting parties, wearing diamonds, and regularly making the gossip columns. She was photographed at events, invited to galas, and spoken about in the same breath as old money elites and rising stars. Her thick Hungarian accent, extravagant taste, and sharp sense of humor made her stand out. Still, the marriage was not a happy one. Zsa Zsa later said she felt controlled by Hilton. She claimed he was traditional, rigid, and unromantic. In her memoirs, she even alleged she had not wanted to sleep with him, but felt she had no choice once they were married. That level of personal frustration came through in public interviews years after the relationship ended. By 1946, the marriage was over. She filed for divorce and was officially separated from Conrad Hilton. However, even after the divorce, she kept the Hilton surname. It wasn't out of sentimentality, though. She understood that in Hollywood, names mattered. Zsa Zsa Hilton carried weight. It was a name that got her meetings, brought her press, and invited curiosity. Casting directors took notice. The name gave her access to a circle that was hard to enter without deep industry connections. The Hilton name opened doors, but her personality kept them open. Hollywood breakthrough. Zsa Zsa Gabor stepped into Hollywood in 1952. She had already built a name for herself in social circles, but that year marked her official entrance into the movie business. Her first big-screen appearance was in Lovely to Look At, a musical comedy with an ensemble cast. It wasn't a lead role, but it introduced her to American filmgoers. That same year, she landed parts in We're Not Married, with Fred Allen and Ginger Rogers, and, more notably, Moulin Rouge, directed by John Huston and starring José Ferrer. In Moulin Rouge, she played Jane Avril, a real-life French can-can dancer and muse of the painter Toulouse-Lautrec. José Ferrer portrayed the artist, and the film followed his life and struggles with vivid color and theatrical style. Zsa Zsa's role wasn't large, but she fit the part visually and brought her natural elegance to the screen. The film received strong attention and even earned Oscar nominations, which gave her early exposure to serious cinema audiences. By the time Moulin Rouge was in theaters, people were already taking note of Zsa Zsa's screen presence. She had a distinct mix of European glamour and Hollywood charm that wasn't common at the time. Her accent, posture, and way of delivering lines made her stand out, even in supporting roles. Still, it became clear early on that her fame wasn't going to be built only on acting. She followed up with a string of appearances that kept her on the radar, but never quite made her a leading lady in the traditional sense. In Lily, 1953, The Girl in the Kremlin, 1957, and Queen of Outer Space, 1958, she played variations of the same glamorous character that reflected her public image. It was less about disappearing into roles and more about bringing her signature persona to each project. Her performances became part of the larger character she played in real life, the confident, stylish woman who always had a witty line ready. One of her more memorable roles came in Death of a Scoundrel in 1956, where she acted opposite her then-husband, George Sanders. The film followed the rise and fall of a ruthless businessman, with Sanders in the lead. Zsa Zsa played a woman entangled in his schemes. This was a darker, more dramatic project compared to her earlier light-hearted roles, and it gave her a chance to show a different side. It didn't lead to a major shift in her career, but it gave her solid acting credit with a more serious tone. 2 years later, she appeared briefly in Orson Welles' Touch of Evil, a noir crime drama now considered a classic. Her role was small, she played a strip club owner in a single scene, but the film itself had a lasting legacy, and her name stayed attached to it in Hollywood trivia. Working with someone like Welles added credibility to her resume, even if the screen time was minimal. She continued to take small roles in movies throughout the 1960s and beyond, but her reputation had already shifted. Audiences became more interested in Zsa Zsa herself than the character she played. She became the kind of celebrity who didn't need a starring role to be recognized. Her personality was the main event. Talk shows, TV cameos, and dollink. Producers kept inviting her back because she always delivered. Her charm, accent, and unpredictable responses made her a favorite on talk shows, game shows, and sitcoms. She appeared on Gilligan's Island as Erica Tiffany Smith, a wealthy heiress looking to buy the island. Her presence fit perfectly. She wasn't trying to be subtle. The writers leaned into her persona, and she gave them exactly what they expected: glamour, confidence, and comedic timing. In the world of sitcoms, she played herself, but bigger. In Batman, she played Minerva, a glamorous criminal who ran a beauty spa. The show's over-the-top style matched her perfectly. Her appearance wasn't long, but it didn't need to be. She wore glittering outfits, raised her eyebrows at the right moments, and left an impression. Her name in the credits guaranteed people would watch. People didn't watch Zsa Zsa for character work. They watched to see Zsa Zsa be Zsa Zsa, and she always gave them what they came for. On Hollywood Squares and Match Game, she played up her personality with quick one-liners and over-the-top reactions. These shows weren't scripted, and that worked in her favor. She didn't need a writer to tell her how to be funny. She already knew how to entertain a room. Talk shows gave her the most freedom. She could sit in a chair, sip a drink, and steal the conversation. She could toss off a comment with a mix of flirtation and sarcasm, making the audience laugh while leaving the host slightly off balance. She also had a signature phrase called dollink. She used it with everyone. It was playful, but also dismissive depending on how she said it. Sometimes it came with a smile, sometimes with a smirk. That one word became a piece of her brand. You could hear it and know exactly who it came from. Her outfits also did part of the work. She dressed like someone going to a gala, even when she was just appearing on a weekday show. Rhinestones, satin, silk scarves, oversized jewelry, she wore it all. She understood how to turn herself into an image that people couldn't forget. She didn't change depending on the setting. Whether she was next to a late-night host or a panel of comedians, she acted the same. That consistency became part of her draw. You never wondered which version of Zsa Zsa would show up. There was only one. The audience didn't care about plot lines or punchlines. They cared about the way she carried herself. She could say almost anything, and it would land. She was unpredictable, but not chaotic. She walked the line carefully. Producers liked that. But it wasn't always her charisma that drew people in. It was the mystery that followed her everywhere, especially in matters of the heart. 9 husbands and famous lovers. Zsa Zsa Gabor was married 9 times and always liked to say she had 8 husbands. That's because one of the marriages didn't legally count, and she wasn't about to give credit where it wasn't due. Her love life was as public as her career, and just as headline-worthy. Each relationship had its own story, and some ended more dramatically than others. After divorcing Hilton, Zsa Zsa married George Sanders, a British actor known for his deep voice. They married in 1949, and their relationship lasted until 1954. It was one of her longer marriages and stayed in the press partly because of what happened afterward. But trust me, the real drama didn't end with the divorce. Stick around for the twist that made headlines all over again. Next came Herbert Huttner, a financier and philanthropist. Their marriage lasted from 1962 to 1966. Zsa Zsa often said he was one of the more generous men she married, and she appreciated the lifestyle that came with being his wife. After Huttner, she married Joshua Cosden Jr., an oil heir. That one lasted only a year. Then came Jack Ryan, the man behind the original Barbie doll design and an inventor with a flashy personality. Their relationship was full of energy, but didn't last long. They were married in 1975 and divorced within a year. In 1976, she married Michael O'Hara, a Beverly Hills lawyer. This relationship was more low-key compared to her earlier ones. They divorced in 1983. Just 1 year later, she had what became one of the shortest marriages in celebrity history. Zsa Zsa married Mexican actor Felipe de Alba in 1983, but the ceremony wasn't valid because her divorce from O'Hara hadn't been finalized. The marriage lasted less than 24 hours and was never legal. She later dismissed it completely and rarely counted it when she talked about her husbands. Her ninth and final marriage was to Prince Frederick von Anhalt in 1986. He was around 30 years younger than her and had received his royal title through adult adoption by Princess Marie Auguste of Anhalt. The marriage gave Zsa Zsa a new title, Princess von Anhalt, and she used it publicly for the rest of her life. Despite questions from royal genealogists about the legitimacy of the title, Zsa Zsa embraced it and remained married to Frederick until she died. Zsa Zsa's approach to love was direct, flashy, and unapologetic. She once famously said, "I am a marvelous housekeeper. Every time I leave a man, I keep his house." That quote followed her for decades and summed up how people saw her. Some of her marriages lasted longer than others, but each one left a mark on her image, and not all of them ended peacefully. The George Sanders-Magda Gabor tangle. Now back to George Sanders, because his story with Zsa Zsa wasn't quite over. In fact, things were just getting weird. After their marriage ended in 1954, George Sanders did something that, even by Hollywood standards, was considered a shocking twist. He married Zsa Zsa's older sister, Magda Gabor. It wasn't a long or loving relationship. In fact, it barely lasted 6 weeks. And according to reports from the time, it was mostly a move made out of spite. Sanders was said to have proposed to Magda not because of romance, but because of lingering bitterness toward Zsa Zsa. Some who knew the family suspected it was an intentional way to needle his ex-wife, who had remained a public figure long after their divorce. The marriage created a wave of tension within the Gabor family. Zsa Zsa and Magda already had a complicated sisterly dynamic. Less famous than Zsa Zsa and Eva, Magda often tried to carve out her own identity. Marrying her sister's ex-husband didn't help that effort. Family gatherings, to the extent they happened at all, reportedly became awkward and cold. Friends of the Gabors say that after the Sanders-Magda marriage ended, the sisters never quite repaired the damage. Neither of them discussed it in great detail publicly, but for years the move was whispered about in Hollywood circles. It became part of the Gabor family lore, bizarre, uncomfortable, and oddly fitting for a family where personal drama often made more headlines than professional work. The tabloids were all over it. Stories ran with headlines that played up the tangled relationships. Magazines painted it as a real-life soap opera with roles constantly shifting between lovers, rivals, and sisters. Sanders, already known for his public persona, didn't try to explain much. He later wrote a memoir that didn't go deep into his motivations, but made it clear he saw life and relationships as performances. For him, marrying Magda may have been another act in the long play of getting under Zsa Zsa's skin. Zsa Zsa, for her part, never officially acknowledged being hurt by it, but her silence on the topic during interviews often said more than words could. While she was known to speak openly and sharply about most of her exes, she usually avoided bringing up the Sanders-Magda marriage. It was as if acknowledging it gave it too much power. The subject rarely came up after the 1970s, but it had already done its job in cementing Zsa Zsa's image not just as a woman with many husbands, but as the center of one of the most surreal family triangles in Hollywood history. For years, reporters would occasionally bring it up, trying to get her to comment. She never gave them the satisfaction of a dramatic quote. That restraint, rare for her, may have been the clearest sign that it hit a personal nerve. But Zsa Zsa's life was far from quiet, and things took a sharp turn with an incident that instantly grabbed headlines and defined her public persona for years to come. The infamous Beverly Hills slap. The Beverly Hills slap. In 1989, Zsa Zsa Gabor was pulled over while driving in Beverly Hills. Her white Rolls-Royce had expired tags, and the police officer on duty flagged her down for a routine traffic stop. What should have been a quick exchange turned into one of the most talked-about moments of her life. When the officer approached Zsa Zsa, she didn't stay quiet. According to reports, she argued with him, questioned his attitude, and made it clear she wasn't happy about the stop. She later claimed the officer was rude, while police maintained he followed the rules. During the interaction, Gabor slapped him across the face. The officer immediately arrested her. The charge was battery on a police officer, along with others like driving without a license and resisting arrest. The media grabbed hold of the story within hours. Gabor was no stranger to headlines, but this wasn't the usual gossip. It was a criminal case, and it took over the news. When it came time to appear in court, she didn't try to blend in. Dressed in designer outfits, often dripping in diamonds, she walked into the courtroom like it was a photo shoot. Her attitude didn't help her case. She made bold statements, joked with reporters, and even mocked the situation on late-night TV. But inside the courtroom, her jokes fell flat. The judge wasn't amused, and prosecutors didn't back down. She was found guilty and sentenced to 3 days in jail. She also had to complete community service and attend an anger management course. The jail time wasn't long, but it was still a major fall from grace. For someone who had spent most of her life being photographed at parties and premieres, this was different. She served her time at the Century Regional Detention Facility. Even after release, the story stayed with her. Then came the civil suit. The police officer she slapped sued her for slander. He claimed her public comments during the trial and in interviews had damaged his name. She had called him unprofessional and accused him of treating her unfairly. That case didn't get as much attention as the original arrest, but it stretched on until 1991. Eventually, they settled out of court. The terms were kept private, but the matter was officially closed. But for Zsa Zsa, the slap became more than just a legal problem. It followed her for years. Anytime she appeared on TV or walked a red carpet, reporters brought it up. The incident even popped up in comedy sketches, interviews, and pop culture references. It became one of those celebrity moments that people remembered long after the news faded. Before the slap, Zsa Zsa was mostly known for her marriages and glamorous lifestyle. But after it, people saw her in a different light. The charm was still there, but the incident added an edge to her image. Some found it amusing. Others saw it as proof that she lived by her own rules, even if that meant crossing the line. Her legal team did what they could to move the public past the story, but it stuck. The photo of her arriving at court in full makeup and high heels became just as famous as any film still. She stayed defiant throughout, never fully apologizing and never backing down from her version of events. To make matters worse, her legal troubles didn't stop there. Feuds, lawsuits, and losses. In the 1990s, Zsa Zsa Gabor found herself back in the courtroom. But this time, the headlines had nothing to do with a slap. This legal fight involved actress Elke Sommer, a former co-star and longtime rival. What started as sharp remarks in interviews and tabloid gossip turned into an expensive courtroom drama. Zsa Zsa and her husband, Prince Frederick von Anhalt, had made several comments to German media outlets about Sommer, accusing her of everything from career envy to personal misconduct. Sommer wasn't amused. She took legal action, filing a defamation and libel lawsuit against both Gabor and von Anhalt in California. The trial lasted for several days and received heavy press coverage. Zsa had little room to perform in the courtroom. Her claims were picked apart, and the jury didn't buy the couple's explanations. Sommer won the case. The Gabors were ordered to pay $3.3 million in damages. The verdict was a major blow, not just to Zsa Zsa's finances, but to her pride. For someone who had built a public image on glamour and control, being defeated in court by a fellow celebrity cut deep. Just a few years later, another major financial disaster struck. In 2009, Zsa Zsa's lawyer revealed that she had lost around $7 million in investments tied to Bernie Madoff's massive Ponzi scheme. Like thousands of others, she had been caught in the illusion of guaranteed returns and financial stability. Madoff's downfall exposed how fragile even the most luxurious lifestyles could be. That $7 million wasn't pocket change. It was the kind of loss that could shake anyone's foundation, especially at a time when her ability to earn was limited. By this point, her image as a wealthy, untouchable Hollywood icon was starting to slip. It wasn't just the Madoff scandal that hurt. A few years earlier, in 2005, Zsa Zsa and her husband had filed a lawsuit against her only daughter, Francesca Hilton. They accused her of fraud and larceny, claiming she had forged Gabor's signature to take out a loan on her mother's home. The case created a public divide between mother and daughter, further straining what had already been a complicated relationship. Francesca denied the accusations, but the damage was done. Their conflict spilled into the tabloids, with both sides presenting different versions of the truth. This lawsuit became part of a growing list of legal and financial troubles that had followed Zsa Zsa well into her later years. She now had to deal with court appearances, legal bills, and settlement agreements. It marked a noticeable shift in the way the public talked about her. She was someone fighting to maintain control over her finances and her reputation. What made this chapter of her life so striking was how far it stood from the version of Zsa Zsa the world had known for decades. But now, her personal battles were being played out in courtrooms instead of movie sets or television studios. Her name was still in the papers, but for reasons far different from her usual high society charm or bold fashion choices. By the late 2000s, these setbacks had started to take a toll. Zsa Zsa was no longer making regular public appearances. The interviews slowed, the witty one-liners faded. Her once glittering life had grown quieter. Accidents, surgery, and fragile health. And then in 2002, Zsa Zsa Gabor's health also took a serious turn after a car accident in Los Angeles. She had been a passenger when the vehicle struck a light pole on Sunset Boulevard. The crash caused multiple injuries, broken bones, deep cuts, and serious bruising. She was taken to Cedars-Sinai Medical Center and remained in a coma for several days. The accident left her body weakened, and the recovery process was long and difficult. She never fully regained her independence. After she was released from the hospital, she began using a wheelchair and would remain in one for the rest of her life. The crash marked the beginning of a long stretch of medical issues that continued for over a decade. Zsa Zsa didn't make many public appearances after the accident. The shift was noticeable. For someone who had built a career around being seen on red carpets, on talk shows, in front of cameras, being physically limited changed how the world interacted with her. Her glamorous image, which had defined her for years, became harder to maintain, but she kept her routines at home and stayed surrounded by personal staff and close acquaintances. But in 2005, 3 years after the accident, disaster struck again as she suffered a stroke. It affected her speech and movement. She was rushed to the hospital and treated, but her recovery was slow. The stroke added another layer of difficulty to her already limited mobility. The right side of her body became significantly weaker. Her ability to communicate clearly was also affected, making public appearances nearly impossible. After this event, her husband, Prince Frederick von Anhalt, took a larger role in handling her medical decisions and daily needs. Her condition continued to deteriorate. In July 2010, Zsa Zsa broke her hip at home. She was getting out of bed when she fell. The fracture required immediate hip replacement surgery. The operation itself was risky, considering her age and prior medical history, but it went forward. Following the surgery, complications began to stack up quickly. She needed a blood transfusion and went into critical condition shortly after. Her blood pressure dropped, her body reacted poorly to the medication, and her heart showed signs of strain. Doctors were on high alert, and her publicist at the time described her condition as life-threatening. By early 2011, she was battling yet another serious health issue. Doctors discovered a blood clot in her right leg. It had become infected and wasn't responding to treatment. Over time, the infection turned into gangrene. Because of the severity of the condition, doctors made the decision to amputate her leg above the knee in January 2011. She was 93 at the time. The surgery was considered necessary to save her life. According to hospital reports, she made it through the operation without complications, but her physical health never fully stabilized after that. She required round-the-clock care. Her immune system was fragile, and even minor illnesses became high-risk situations. Over the following months, her condition remained touch and go. In March 2011, she was hospitalized again after learning about the death of Elizabeth Taylor. The news had shocked her. Her husband said she was deeply emotional and told him, "I'm next." That same year, she was admitted to the hospital multiple times. One was for a stomach infection, another for internal bleeding. Each hospital stay came with new complications. Each procedure took more from her body than the last. Throughout all of this, her public image was slowly fading. She was rarely seen in photos and stopped making any kind of media appearances. Most updates about her health came from Prince Frederick, who acted as her primary spokesperson and medical decision-maker. He maintained that she was still mentally alert and in good spirits, but friends and family began raising questions about her care and the state of her finances. In 2012, her only child, Francesca Hilton, filed legal paperwork asking for access to her mother and more oversight of Prince Frederick's control. Francesca claimed she hadn't been allowed to visit Zsa Zsa freely and accused her stepfather of mismanaging both her mother's care and finances. The court granted Hilton limited visitation rights while Frederick remained as Gabor's conservator. He was required to file regular reports with the court, including updates on Zsa Zsa's health and spending. The legal battle between Francesca and Frederick added stress to an already fragile situation. By this time, Zsa Zsa was living almost entirely out of the public eye. Her condition was described as extremely delicate. She had lost the ability to walk, speak clearly, or eat without assistance. Nurses and private doctors came and went from her Bel Air home, which had been turned into a kind of in-house medical unit. Her immune system was weak. Even minor infections sent her back to the hospital. Her husband continued to manage all public communication. At times, he gave interviews where he described her daily routine or insisted that she was watching television and aware of current events. Some friends and former colleagues questioned the accuracy of those statements, but no outside confirmations were made. Final year in the auction afterlife. Zsa Zsa lived for several more years under this arrangement, and then on December 18, 2016, she passed away from heart failure. She was 99 at the time. It was the end of a long, dramatic life that had stretched from pre-war Europe all the way through modern Hollywood. At the time of her death, she had outlived many of her peers, including both of her sisters and nearly all of her former husbands. She had also outlived her only child, Francesca, who had died in 2015 at the age of 67 from a stroke. 2 years after her death, Zsa Zsa's belongings became the focus of renewed public interest. In April 2018, an estate auction called Hello Darlings was announced, featuring hundreds of personal items from her long and extravagant life. Nearly 1,000 objects were put up for sale. The auction was handled by Heritage Auctions and included items from her Beverly Hills mansion and storage units that had been closed for years. The collection offered a rare look into the private world she had carefully curated over the decades. There were glamorous pieces like the 104-piece champagne set that once helped stock her lavish parties, and more sentimental items, including handwritten letters, custom clothing, and pieces of jewelry. Her taste leaned heavily toward gold, rhinestones, animal prints, and anything that glittered. One of the standout items in the auction was a portrait by the artist Margaret Keane, known for her paintings of wide-eyed figures. The painting depicted Gabor herself, and it ended up selling for $45,000, making it the highest-priced piece in the entire sale. Another item that drew attention was a Western saddle gifted to her by Ronald Reagan, back when he was still active in Hollywood and long before he entered politics. The saddle was both a conversation piece and a symbol of the circle she moved in. She counted presidents, actors, royalty, and business tycoons among her friends and lovers, and that saddle reminded bidders just how far her reach had once extended. The auction attracted media attention, not just for the items themselves, but for what it revealed about the final chapter of her life. Many of the pieces had been stored away and untouched for years, suggesting a quiet winding down of the glitz and glamour she had once embraced so publicly. Some fans saw the sale as a tribute to her legacy, while others saw it as the end of a long, complicated life story. So, what do you think? Hit that like if she surprised you too, and don't forget to subscribe for more untold stories.